In this video, I want to show you how I would model up Jimmy Diresta's awesome workbench in Fusion 360. Hi everybody, my name is Lars Christensen and thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. A few weeks ago, I did a live stream about how to create cut list inside of Fusion 360, and I was inspired by Jimmy Diresta's workbenches to use that as an example. Now, a few people requested that they actually saw how I modeled that up, so that is this video. But first, you should definitely go and check out Jimmy Diresta's YouTube channel. I'm a huge fan, I'm a contributor on his Patreon site, and he's definitely worth to follow. If you like what you see here in the channel, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up. If you don't, hey, be honest, hit the thumbs down. And if you haven't already, I would definitely appreciate if you hit that subscribe button. Let's get to the modeling. So I'm going to do this with a couple of different techniques. Let's start out here by creating a new component, as this will be an assembly. So I'm going to click New Component, and I'm going to go ahead here and just name this one right out of the bat here. So Square Tubing. And let's go in and start our first sketch. It doesn't matter what plane I'm sketching on. I'm going to hit the S key on my keyboard for my sketch toolbar, and I have the center rectangle right here. I'm going to go ahead and sketch up something that is 3 by 3 inches here. And then I'm going to hit O for offset. And I'm just going to offset this edge in here minus 0.25. Now that's really all I'm going to do with this square tubing right within this sketch. I'm going to hit Q so we can do our press pull. And I'm going to make this one 8 feet long. So I'm actually going to type in 8 and then do FT for feet. See that right inside of the distance dialog there. Hit OK. And we now have an 8 feet piece of square tubing. Now there's going to be a couple of fillets on it here. So I'm going to hit F for fillet. And I'm just going to start out by selecting the outside edges, and you don't have to spin around to select the different edges. You can actually select right through here. And I'm going to make this 0.25, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the inside. So I'm going to right click and hit repeat fillet. That's just one way to get to a repeat command. And then I'm going to select the inside edges right here. And again, you can select right through the solids here. And I'm going to make it 0.15. Just like that. So this is my first piece of tubing. So this is a 3 by 3 by 8. Now I'm going to go up and make my top assembly here. I'm going to make that active there. And then I'm going to do a right click and do a move copy command. Now in here, I can select different things. I'm going to select the component. I'm going to select right on our component here. And then I'm going to create a copy of that component. What's going to create a second component over here in the tree. And I can now just drag that this way here. And I'm going to make the table 4 feet wide and hit enter. So now what we have here is 2 square tubings, but they are copies of one another. What means that if I go into our first tubing, and if I, for example, change the extrusion from 8 to 6 feet, you will see that it's going to resemble on both of them. This is now a copy of this one. But it's fine. It's just good to know that that is how the move copy tool works. Let's go back and make that one back to 8 again. Now we're going to go ahead and make the end piece here. But the end piece, of course, is going to be shorter than the original 8. So now we actually need to break a copy to be able to do that. And the way we can do that is if I go up on our first square tubing again, and I right click, I can do a copy. And then by having the top component here active, and if I right click on that now, I can either do a paste, that will just be a copy like the one we just created for the second half of the length. But if I do a paste new, this will actually be a broken copy. So they are not associated, they're not linked together. So I'm going to click on that. And you will actually see that I get what was called kind of like a free move as soon as I do that, as soon as I place that here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm just going to hit the little handle here, rotate it 90 degrees. And then I'm going to go over and select point to point. And I'm going to do that. I can actually go over on our edge here and I can select a point that I can now align this component up with right there. And now when I hit OK, you will see that I got now the third component in here that is not linked, but of course it is still too long. So I can actually go in and activate that, and I can now make that shorter, and that will be independent from the other one. Now, one thing you will just notice here when I make it shorter is that it actually on the screen jumps back to where it originally was when this happened. So that's one of the things to be aware of, that because we're going back in history, that will also affect that. I'm going to make it 45 inches long and hit OK. And if I go up and make our main component, main assembly active, you will now see that I got that to the right length. Now I can go ahead and now make a copy of this one. So I can do what we did before. I can right click and I can now go ahead and with this component selected, I can select it here, select create a copy, because that is what this is going to be. And sometimes I actually like to drag it out a little bit first before I go back into the point to point. It just gives me a chance to make sure that I select the copy, and I can select a point here and I can select a point here. And when I hit OK, we now have the fourth component in here. So as this is created right here, this is our original one, and this was a copy of that one. Then we broke by doing a paste new the second one that we now have made a copy of there. What that means is that if we ever change the length of the first component, then everything will update along with it. This is one of the nice things about parametric design. Now with this put together here, one of the things to be aware of is that right now everything in here actually still floats around. Each component have not been tied down to one another. Let me just hit Ctrl+Z to go back to where we were here. So in a CAD system like Fusion 360, we now need to kind of, well, like Jimmy Diresta does, weld these together. So the first thing we got to do is we gotta nail one of them into space. And we're going to go up here on the first one, right click, and I'm going to ground it. What that means is get a little thumbtack. That means that this component is kind of like grounded in space. And then I actually have a very nice function in here called rigid group. And I can now go in and select the remaining components in here, hit OK, and now everything is not moving anymore. Everything is in place. So at this point, I am ready to put some legs on this component, and I'm actually just gonna move along and use the same technique as I used before, where I'm just gonna right click and I'm gonna do a copy, and then I'm gonna go up on the top component up here and I'm gonna do a paste new. Now this component, I'm just gonna move it out of the way a little bit like this. And now I'm gonna go ahead and actually rotate it up, because it is going to be the leg. So I can rotate it just like that, and I can now go ahead and I can place it in whatever location I kind of want to locate it. But there's another way that I can place things in here. So I'm just gonna hit OK to let it sit out in space. And that is using joints. And it's just as perfect to use joints for this as it is to use the move copy. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to select this edge right here. And I am going to find the edge where that's going to be over there. And our leg will now be in place right there. Now this leg is a little bit longer than I actually want, so I'm going to go and make that active. Go into our extrusion here, hit edit, and you'll see again everything falls back to where it was before. I'm going to do 36 inches for this leg, and that is the length I want for that leg. Now, another thing we could do to move things around like this is we could also go ahead and we could use the patterning command. So I'm going to go ahead and hit rectangular pattern, and you have different selections up here, and I'm going to select component, and I'm going to select our leg. And when you do that, we can select a direction. So I'm going to select one of the edges, and immediately it gives me arrows, and I can start moving thing down here. Now you see the default's to 3, and that's the total quantity. I actually only want 2, like this here. And I have it on spacing, and now we can move it down here. And I can actually cheat. I know it's 99 inches, but we can zoom in here, and we can see that 99 minus 99 is the length I need here for this here. But there's actually also 2 legs over here, right? So we can actually also do and grab the arrow here, and we can do the same thing by going 2, and then we just gotta place this in the right location. Zoom in here, and it looks like 48 is the right number for that. Hit OK. And we now have placed the 4 legs. Now, just like we used the rigid group and the other ones, you will actually see that that these legs will move also, even though that they are patterns. So I'm going to go up and do another rigid group, and I select these 4 legs. Now, when I hit OK here, you will now see that we have a rigid group, and these 4 legs are now in place. With that, I probably just continue with our patterning command. So if I go up here and I do a patterning, I can select these 4 components here, and I am going to select the direction this way here. And again, I only want 2. So I'm going to do 2, and I want it to be minus 25. Get that section down there and hit OK. Now again, as soon as we look at this, we can see that things are still floating in space. So we're going to go back to our trusted rigid group. And if I select the 4 elements here and hit OK, you will see that they move together. What I have to do is I have to tie that rigid group in with one of the components that is attached to the original. And we had that this component here is joined into our original component. Hit OK, and now you will see that now everything is back in place. Now, Jimmy Diresta also had a center support. I'm going to do mine a little bit different than his, but again, I can go in and I can use the exact same commands as you have already seen me use. So I'm going to go in and do a right click, and I'm going to do a move, and I'm just going to select this component here. I'm going to use this time I'm going to use the free move because I know that, and I want it to be a copy, of course. Select this component. It's going to be a copy, and I know that this is going to be half of the length, what in our case is 4 feet. What? I can't do math? Subtract 1.5. I can go ahead and click OK to that, and I can repeat move command. I can go ahead and select that component I just moved down here. I can create another copy of that. We just move that down, and that was minus 25. Now I just need a little piece that goes between here. It's going to be 22 because we're going to subtract the 3-inch square tubing. So I'm just going to select one of them here, right click and do a copy and go up on the top here, right click and do a paste new, and I now have that component moved out of the way here that I can now work with. So I'm going to go into that one, make that active, and go into the length here. And like I said, it's going to be 22 long. Now to place this one here, I am definitely going to use the joint command, capture position. You'll see me doing that all the time. Now here's a neat way to do this, because look at this. When I come over here, you'll actually see when I hover over that it gives me the center point of the tubing. And if I hold down Control or Command, I can actually hover over and I can grab that center right there. What means if I go over on our other square tubing, I can select the center of that one, and I will place my centerpiece right between there. Now, of course, these components are also still moving around, so we will need to do another rigid group. So like this, and it gives me a warning here that there is a joint in this selection, and just tells me if I want to continue. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to select one of the bars, probably the first square tubing we selected, and add that one into that. And that's going to give us the entire metal framing for this. Now, the last thing we got to do is we got to put a piece of material on top of this. So I'm going to create a new component, and that is going to be the top of the surface. And I'm going to create a sketch. Now this sketch I'm going to create, of course, right on top of the part here, because that's where you put it. And actually, when I'm doing something like this, I would probably just sketch a rectangle that is too big, and then I will use the collinear relationship between, I'm still on axis, collinear between here to here, here to here, here to here, and the last one in here. So that way I have made sure that the tabletop is following along here. And then I'm just going to go ahead and hit Q for press pull, and I can select our top surface here, and I'm going to make this 1 inch thick. So there is our tabletop. Now there's still a couple of things I want to do at this point. One of the things I'm going to do is there is some naming things that is going on in here. So these components, some of these components in here, when you're looking at them, you might want to name them as you're going along, just to make it easier for yourself. So for example, I can go down to this top here, and I could call this the table top, and you can name everything by slowly clicking on it. Now another thing is that by default, Fusion 360 makes everything metal as a material. You can actually go and you can right click, and you get two options. You get one where you can do physical material. Physical material in here means that if you're doing any kind of simulation or something like that, and you'll see there's all different kinds of materials in here. Somebody told me that this would be an MDF board that Jimmy Diresta used, so that's what I'm going to select. But you will see that I also have the option to go in here and change the physical material also. And in here you will see that we have all different types of woods in here. A lot of them that are ones that you can download. That is also an unfinished in here. And you will see that I have a MDF board right here. You can download them on these small arrows, so I can move that over on the body right here. Also, you will see that you can see the joints are appearing in here, so I can turn those on and off, of course, on the lights over here. And the last thing that I gotta add to this table here is that in good Jimmy Diresta fashion, he spray paints his logo on. So let's go ahead and insert a decal and select an image. And I have an image right out on my desktop. Select that, and I can select the face to place it on. I'm just going to select it on this face, Let's go on the top surface here, and I can now scale it up and down, move it, rotate it, whatever we want, and place that image there. And this kind of like finishes how I modeled up that table. That's it. I hope that you found this video helpful. A couple of different techniques on how to copy and paste components. Go over and check out Jimmy Diresta's YouTube channel. And until the next time, have an awesome day.